action. And welcome everybody. This is PnP Weekly episode 177. It is 5th of September 2022. This is take 2. Nobody knew that we had a take 1, which we needed to throw away for numerous reasons.
Which you just said. Spill the beans. Anyway,
now today we'll talk. We in the PnP Weekly always talk about the latest, what's happening in Microsoft 365 with our latest weekly articles from Microsoft and community, and we always have a visitor in the show, which is typically more about the let's say, what is it, human development. Human development is a bad
personal
word.
journey,
career development, and experiences rather than any specific technical area or functionality area around Microsoft 365.
You've got a bug on line 42.
Thank you.
A really deep dive technical thing.
Yes.
Bracket in there.
Yes. But today we had Kevin. Who's Kevin? Can you do a quick intro as well?
Kevin McDonnell. He is practice lead at CPS in the UK,
CPS.
I believe.
Yep.
And we thought we had a really great discussion about employee experience, remote work, Viva, how things change or not in the last 2 years. So really, really great interview about all things communication and employee experience. So if you're interested in that, you will really enjoy the chat that we had with him.
Absolutely. And without further ado, let's jump on the interview with Kevin. And here we go. Thank you, Kevin, for joining us on the PnP Weekly episode 177. We've been doing this for a while. And before we started recording, we just realized that it's been a while since you came to be an MVP. So we do apologize for the delay on getting you on the show as well. But Kevin, can you do a quick intro who you are and what do you do for a living?
Just quickly, Andrew invited Gary twice before me, my co-host. I'll let you off that one. So my name is...
No competition whatsoever, right?
No, yeah, exactly.
We'll start as we need to go on. My name's Kevin McDonnell. I'm the head of practice for Modern Workplace at a UK-based gold partner, a Microsoft gold partner called CPS. I was about to say Office Apps and Services, sorry, Microsoft 365 Apps and Services MVP, co-host the Grey Hat Beard Princess podcast with Gary, Al Erdley and Louisa Fries, and also a Viva Explorer as well, which is a group of MVPs helping to share the what, the why and the how of Microsoft Viva.
Ooh, which is
I've never heard of this one. I think we will need a link.
Yes, we need a link. Yes.
Yep, definitely. Nice and easy. VivaExplorers.com. We're relatively new in terms of the website, so I know there's a few typos and bits and pieces that need updating on there, definitely. But yes, I'll send that through to you as well.
Cool. Before we go there, and before we go to the MVP, can you explain what does a practice lead actually do, and how do you got to be a practice lead? What does it mean actually for those who don't know?
Oh, now that is a very good question. So in terms of practice lead, whereas previously I was a senior architect and we were there kind of in the early stages, so doing a bit of pre-sales with projects, with clients, helping on the implementation, giving that general oversight. The point of a practice lead is kind of define the strategy. So looking at Viva, looking at SharePoint, what's happening within that, working with the marketing teams as the sales teams to kind of say we should be targeting these things. And it really kind of goes a bit broader than just helping the clients deliver things. It's which clients should we be going after? What sort of technology should we look after? It's got that real breadth of things, which I would say has been an interesting struggle on there. So it was kind of fairly new. I mentioned just briefly Al Erdley there. He used to be the head of delivery services at CPS. When he left, we sort of took an opportunity to split things down. He was so important, we basically replaced him with 4 people from there. And it meant that we had a lot more kind of engagement across the org, which I love. You know, I'm sure we'll come on to Viva, but that whole kind of putting people in silos, I've never been a fan of. It's always been the more you can break those silos, especially a smaller company, how you can bring those together. So we're practicing what we preach and trying to get that going as well.
So you mentioned an interesting point, right? Because you mentioned thinking like which technologies to use, which engagement to choose, and that instantly rings a bell to me. How do you go about it? Because there is so much across Microsoft 365 at large, and oftentimes when you build for Microsoft 365, you also need to build on Azure, right? So you touch that part of the Microsoft Cloud too, and then there is Power Platform with Power Apps, Power Automate Flows, which is kind of separate thing by itself already, right? So how do you go about it? How do you define on what to choose? How do you stay up to date? How?
I'm probably the wrong person because I am so nosy. I'll be trying to keep up with everything, and someone will mention something like, "Oh, have you heard about this new JavaScript framework?" I'm like, "Oh." So to me, it's more about how do you stay focused on any one thing on there. But I think it's by talking to other people. It's by following podcasts, following Twitter and things like that to see what things. And I think that also allows you to kind of get the different buzzes that happen at the time. If you hear a lot of people speaking about something, I've got to a point now where I can't jump the second I hear about something. But if I hear about it 2 or 3 more times, I'm like, okay, maybe I need to dig into this thing as well. And especially if you hear clients talking about it as well. So you've got kind of different things. You've got people in the community, you've got the Microsoft experts who go mentioning things. Then if you hear clients asking you about it twice, you're like, okay, this is resonating. And going back to Viva, it's what I found is that the noise from that was very loud. And I will be honest, my initial reaction was, well, hang on, this is a whole load of technology that's already there. There's nothing new here particularly. But it was the marketing message. It was the message that resonated with people that suddenly got out there. And so you kind of go after those, read a bit more about it. I'd like to try and dig deeper on some things. So you've got certifications and courses. I still like to get hands-on. We were joking before it started about not being able to do any development anymore, but I now do development for fun more than because I have to. So I'll do my evenings. I'll be plugging away on the laptop, watching House of Dragon and all sorts of things like that. But that it becomes something I enjoy doing, and that's where you kind of get that deeper understanding of things as well. That go through. So I find it very hard. You know, we talk about employee experience, we talk about making sure you take a break, but I also think the value of spending that time in the evenings kind of trying things out and getting hands-on when you may not have a chance, it is still important. I don't downplay taking a break. You know, and I'm not long back from 2 weeks away in France where I didn't touch things too much. It is really important, but I would also say trying to get hands-on, not just reading stuff, is actually getting hands-on with things. And that doesn't have to be development. It could be, you know, Viva Goals is my current fun thing, actually creating goals. I'm currently trying to create an organization based on kids' TV shows and setting their goals out from there. And probably because I've had the summer holidays and too many things of Paw Patrol and Bluey and other things on in the background. I'm trying to build out a demo tenant like that, but it means that I'm kind of thinking about things, not just the kind of standard that you'd see, the kind of hello world type samples. You apply some real stuff to it, and that's where you go, oh, actually, yeah, this doesn't work as well.
Yeah. Now coming back on the noise, what you're hearing, what is the noise in UK? What you mentioned Viva, what does that mean in practice? You hear about Viva customer asking about employee experiences, but what does it mean in practice? Where is that noise coming from?
So customers. I think Viva
Thank you.
But I think it's interesting. Viva is being mentioned a lot, and what I love is you're going to have that conversation, and in many cases they mean Viva Connections because they want to put a new intranet in. They haven't looked at the different aspects of like Viva Insights, where you're doing the measurements of well-being and other areas of productivity within there. You haven't got people thinking about learning or even Viva Goals and the kind of OKR framework. But I think people are. What I do like, and I think especially with hybrids, another buzz phrase that's still around, and the fact that not everyone's being in the office. I think I live just on the commuter belt of London, so it's a hot topic, both work and social life, of how much people are going into the office, how much people are continuing to work from home. And I think that level of employee experience has got organisations thinking about, how do you put employees in the middle? How do you do the things you used to do in a digital way? What happens when people aren't in the office so much? How should we do things better? And I think that's where people are seeing Viva. And as with many buzzwords, they're going, yeah, this is exactly what I want, without necessarily knowing what they want in the first place. And what I love about consultancy is trying to bring those things together and sort of helping people understand what they're actually after, and then working out what the products can do to bring that. And I think that's what originally brought me into the kind of world of SharePoint and others, is that you can help people with that without having to kind of say, here's what I want, take that away and give it back. It's a lot more of an engaged partnership. And I think Viva is very much like that as well.
So what kind of projects are we talking about? So anything what you've done within the past 6 months or related on Viva? It's been now 1.5 months. February 2021 Viva was announced, but then Connections
1.5
was the
months.
first years. 1.5 years.
I was like,
I was thinking, blimey,
it's still March 2020, right?
So yeah, February 2021, Viva was announced. First module going live, GA was Connections in November 2021. Anything what you've actually done as a project? Any interesting experiences?
I think it's fair to say it's been a long, slow kind of take up. We've had a lot of conversations about Viva, a lot of chats about what is possible and things on there. I think a lot of organizations, especially in this kind of post-pandemic, they've invested a lot of money in teams and hybrid working and not always seeing the money there for that next stage, especially when they want to invest more in licenses. So I think we've seen Viva Connections. We've had a few projects implementing that, which many of you very intelligent listeners are thinking, what, you mean just intranets? Yeah, kind of. That's the large part of it, is putting the intranets, making sure it's there in teams. I always love Zoe Wilson, another MVP. She said when they put Viva Connections in, they actually saw a 10-fold increase in their intranet because people using it in Teams, and they saw that. And that's not just homepage. They already had it as the kind of starting page, but they had people more engaged. They were reading more articles just because it was there where people were using things. And I do thank her for that quote, because I use that an awful lot. But so we're seeing a lot of Viva Connections.
Taking notes.
Yes. Follow-up question. Yeah.
But I think we're seeing some. I know Vesa was on the Dev Kitchen. I have had many conversations with clients about taking the SPFX and having the Viva Connections portion there. We haven't had any that have gone live with any, which is really upsetting, because I think there's some great potential there. We've had some who are using it a little bit, but not gone sort of all out. So we're seeing that slow uptake on there. We've had some where just the typical security challenges have made a problem, or the APIs on the system they want just don't provide the personal data in the way that can be secure in a cost-effective way. So I think we're still seeing a lot of conversations, but haven't seen anyone go all in that. Seen a couple of orgs with Viva Insights. I remember ESPC. Oh, what was Vienna? Was that 2017? I think, or 16? I think.
Good question.
I lost track of them now. But,
it's been 84 years.
It's indeed. Maybe 17.
I think 17 was Dublin. No, because it seems to be I go every 3 years, more by accident.
Dublin, correct. 17, yes.
17 was Dublin, so yeah, must have been 16 Vienna. Talking with the workplace analytics team and going, this is amazing. Why isn't everyone using this? And now it's Viva Insights, and finally people are starting to use it and building some custom reports, and that's really interesting. And I think the Viva all-in license is also making a difference. That people are going, well, actually, if we want to do a bit of Viva Insights, we want to do a bit of Viva Learning, the cost is almost there that we might as well go all in. And then if we've got the license, we might as well start implementing these things as well, which I think has been a real benefit. And Viva Goals is getting a lot of interest, and it's kind of branching out into a different aspect of people you're speaking to, the sort of COO office. Again, it's that hybrid working. How do you get people aligned to the culture of an organization, to what the strategy is? The OKR framework is brilliant for that.
You mentioned there are a very, very interesting point. There is very close and dear to my heart, remote work, right? And so rewind.
Why would
March
that
2020.
be? No, just kidding. Sorry.
No idea, right? So
this
rewind
is my
2020,
no,
pandemic hit, right? And companies that maybe planned to change the way they work in the next 2 to 3 years were faced with their reality. We need to do this now or we will lose. So
yeah.
How did you change the engagements that you've done with customers? How did they change the discussions you had with them, their needs of their employees? How did that shift around pandemic and the demands that would bring upon the companies with which you will work?
So I think as we hit the pandemic, the conversations didn't change at all. They just happened a lot faster.
Gotcha.
People, especially with Teams rollout at CPS, my colleagues are a big unified comms side of things. So a lot of the kind of moving that over, getting Teams installed, putting all that things. We were going through some migrations, number of migrations. We suddenly needed to accelerate because they didn't have remote access to the file shares, or it's through painful VPNs and things. So it was almost the same conversation that accelerated. What then happened as the kind of the end of the first year, so what's that, sort of late 2020, is when Viva was really starting to land. People started that conversation about putting the employee in the middle. And I always love the phrase, Viva Connections to me. When everyone was in an office, I used to work in financial services, and you'd often see Bob Diamond. I was at Barclays Capital. He would come walking around all the floors. And you could see he was just getting a feel for the buzz of the place, just to sort of see what was going on. Are people stressed? Are people happy? Is a lot happening? You could get that feel. If your CEO suddenly turns up in your kitchen behind you, you're really going to be nervous and something's going wrong there, especially with your home security on there. And I think a lot
in our
of
case, that would be interesting. Now, imagine CEO of Microsoft in my kitchen at home. Like, that would be something. That would be unexpected.
Now, that would be a social media thing. But yeah, absolutely. But you wouldn't probably be, you probably, if you were in the office in Holland and Satchel walk around just bumbling there, you'd be quite scared as well. But it's so many organizations realized they weren't getting that kind of feel for how everyone was feeling, and that conversation has gone down a lot as well. And that's where our kind of Viva Insights ones have come through, of being able to get that feeling. Are people working too hard? Are they putting enough time to get things done, etc., etc.? And we've been using Glint at CPS for quite some time, and very excited to see that come into the Viva space, because those kind of quick questions, people are always cynical about them, and I'm kind of semi with them, because we've realised, especially being British, that Glint AI does not deal with sarcasm at all well on there. So that would be a nice bit of feedback if any AI people can help deal with that. But it's that kind of, what are people chatting about? What are people thinking about, that you can get by listening to others? How can you bring that in a digital way? And it's never going to be quite the same. But I think, as the three of us know, the pandemic wasn't quite so much of a hit. The only hit was because other people were doing what we've been doing for a while now. And that's the big difference on there. And I do think just quickly, one of the things that I found interesting that hasn't happened since the pandemic, and I think Gary, when he was on the show, talks about that, because he loves talking about this, but that kind of async communications. And I know Waldek with the sort of the PnP world, how you deal with issues, how you collate that without having to have meetings and things. If I'm honest, I thought that would have taken off massively, and I don't think it has. I think it's still very much, if not in person, it is still live discussions that go on. I don't think that culture of writing things down, of doing things in an asynchronous way, has taken off as much as I certainly hoped from it. And I think that's the strange thing.
And that was exactly what I wanted to ask about. Like, to what extent do you see us try to replicate the things that we know from in-person engagements into remote work, and see us probably fail, as opposed to try to rethink new patterns and new ways of engagement that are more suitable for remote work and async and so on? Like, to what extent do you see us fall back to the patterns that we know from in person versus devising new ones?
I think everyone now is falling back to the old ways. I think that, it's almost like we've taken a massive step forward, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back to a certain degree. I think people are keeping live meetings in place. I'm sure both of you have ridiculous time zones where you still have to have meetings. I worked in Singapore for 4 years, and the thing I used to love there was I had 4 hours in the morning to get stuff done before the kind of deluge of meetings. And when I moved back to UK, I had a team in Singapore and different bits of Asia. I had a team in New York, and my day was ridiculous. First thing, you're replying to messages and getting hammered with things, and wanting to join a meeting on the train, and you're being caught late from things. And the whole notion of follow the sun just didn't really happen, because people couldn't grip that. And I truly thought that with the pandemic it would change a bit, and I can't wholeheartedly say it has, sadly.
I think we're still it's going to take more time to basically adjust to the asynchronous way of working. And then I know for a fact that there's already a lot of let's say, feedback internally. For example, in our case, our engineering teams are in China, India, and in Redmond. And I'm in the middle as well, working with the whole teams. Quite often what happens is that the Redmond prefers, which they can because US-based company, that they will only work between 9 to 5. The problem is that if that's the case, they will never have a suitable time for anybody else.
Yeah, there's
the
more than enough hours between 9 to 5 to write a doc.
Well, but that's the thing. But that is the thing. If we would actually move into that async world of doing things, but it is so natural for us to have that interactivity, and I guess that also makes us more human.
But it's upfront easier. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Sorry, well.
But it is an interesting point, right? Because you mentioned, Vesa, that we are not there yet, and I get that. What I do wonder about that, you said that it will take us some time still to get there. What I wonder about, though, yes, we will get there eventually, but only if we make deliberate actions. And I wonder what these actions are. What are the plans that we have? Because otherwise, like, it's just, waiting and happening that it will be bestowed upon us, just this light, like, and now you're,
if you think about internally in Microsoft, I think, Apple did already the interesting statement that everybody needs to get back to work in office, which is like, excuse me, what? And that's a bit of a big demand, and it of course flips things.
Design devices, maybe that's different. I don't know.
I maybe in Microsoft, when you think about it, we have great teams who've been highly successful on completely globally distributed teams, but they deliberately built their organization to support that. And I guess that's probably the difference. It's a new organization. Some of the new organizations, they basically built the whole system in this more global way, rather than being an, let's say, traditional organization, which then extends itself outside of the original boundaries. And I guess that's the difference. Maybe there should be
basically the history you carry or not, right? Because like if you are a new org and you don't have the patterns, well, you don't have anything else to fall back on, so you basically start from scratch and you can go any way you want. But if you come from an org that used to work in the office that way, and you have the ability not to change that, well, you probably won't, because like people will typically go, the route of the last resistance, right?
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's the thing. People will fall back on what's easiest, and it feels easiest talking in person, having a meeting. You come out, it's almost that dopamine hit, isn't it? It's like, I feel we've done something here. Doesn't matter whether you have or not. Doesn't matter whether you've actually completed something. If people have that feeling, that's what they'll go with and push for.
Perception, right?
How can we change that perception? And I think also, how can we humanize async working? I think the number you see on GitHub of people misinterpreting what you're saying in there, and sorry, can't do this, can be very rude, or it could be, no, I haven't got much time. Whereas if you see people in person, you can kind of understand a bit more. So the more that can be humanized, and cynical old man as I am, I've kind of been won over to the worlds of kind of GIFs and emojis and things like that, but it adds a bit more humanity to the things that you can put in there as well. And I think it's how you can try and humanize more of that async comms, so it feels more natural to what you do, and you get that good feeling.
Which is an interesting challenge as well, because that comes even back on privacy versus your own things, privacy versus your family things versus everything else. Because again, if you really want to humanize and be approachable, then you want to be transparent and sharing things. Now, that might actually be something which is not natural for everybody. So they might feel as a remote person either a bit more, let's say, on the back, because you don't know anything about them. Yeah. Because you've never had the chance to go for a coffee.
Well, but it's interesting because if I think back, when like pandemic wasn't a thing and we worked in the office, you would have Christmas party, you would have New Year party, you would have family barbecue where you would bring your partner, your spouse, your kids, and you would socialize, and people would get to meet, the whole you, as opposed to only the you that shows up to work, right? And we don't do that anymore, because like I'm not going to put up a barbecue in my backyard with a webcam streaming to everybody in my work. Like, that would be weird. That would feel awkward, unless
that's the day when Satya is in your backyard. So coming back when
he
was
can
in the
stream
kitchen.
whatever he
So,
wants.
yeah,
he
then
can
you'd
stream
live
whatever
stream
he wants.
that.
Like probably he would come with a camera crew, so I wouldn't need to do anything, right? But like that is also this interesting part, right? It's like, how can you create that connection and actually ensure that people feel heard, right? And my theory so far is that we need to communicate more, basically to the point where it feels awkward. Like, do we need to really communicate that much? Yes, because we're remote, right? Every single message you share and you don't get a reaction on, that's killing for the morale and engagement, because we're remote. I don't get to see anybody, and you only see people through their reactions that they give you. And the reaction is, it's either a like, a comment, basically recognize, hey, I got your thing. I might be busy, but I will get to it. I saw it, and I get it, and I will give you an answer ASAP. But there is a response, because otherwise, we don't see anything more, right?
That's the dopamine hit what you're getting from the like and reaction, which is actually interesting when you think about it. That starts driving us to a direction where the bad thing about what's being now talked about Facebook and social media and Instagram and everything else drives certain behavior. Is it then a negative thing that we're kind of adapting that more and more in the corporate culture?
How you bring in a very interesting point, because I think the reason why you do that, yeah, exactly. Like we have 2 hours, right? So the reason we did do it in personal life is exactly that. Like you want to share something with bigger audience, and maybe have that the dopamine hit, and it's like have been recognized by others. But I think in the workplace we do the same action, but towards a different goal.
Smaller crew.
Well, and also more relevant. Well, maybe it's not even a different goal. Maybe it's still the same thing. Like people crave being recognized. Right. And whether that's for a huge accomplishment or a single thing, basically knowing that what you do matters. And in remote work, that's so hard because we're disconnected. Like we're looking at screen and there's a wall and there's like I don't see my colleagues maybe except if we get to have a call or not. Right.
How do you make those like praise things that you can do, whether it's in Yammer,
precise, Insights, absolutely.
How you can do those, but how do you make them feel real as well? How do you make sure it's not just, oh, look, it's Friday, Kevin sent me some praise. He must have got his alert from Viva Insights. How can you actually truly have that as a real one?
Timely and relevant. Yes. These are 2 aspects, right? And the relevant part, that is actually pretty hard. But I guess that's actually the same thing as what we had in a past in the office. Why? Because some people prefer a pat on the back. Some people prefer a praise in a group. Some want to have that praise one-on-one because they're extremely shy. And if you do one mismatched, it will be awkward. It will be not appreciated at all. So in other words, you need to know the person that you are about to praise. And that takes, effort, again, deliberate effort and connecting, right? And that part didn't change. But the way we go from there, these are the next step that we try to replicate the same action in virtual way.
But I think, in fact, Vesa, you're involved in this. I think there's also, if you look at that social media building connections, the 3, I don't think Waldek we've ever met. Vesa, I think we've met a couple of times. Yeah, a couple of the ESPCs we've met in there. But I remember the last one in Prague, you were chatting with Laura. I'm going to say this wrong, so apologies. Kokarinen?
Kokarinen, yep. Pretty close. That was good.
That wasn't too bad.
She has a really hard name to pronounce.
She has a last name. It's just a last name in Finnish. It's not hard. It's not easy. It's just a last name.
But I remember, I loved her blog posts. I loved her sort of presence on Twitter, and you kind of feel someone. So I went up and said, "Hi, I really like your blog," and things like that. And she looked slightly petrified, if I'm honest. Now, probably because I kind of came over, and you also realise as a man you have to be slightly cautious.
Awesome.
Well, going for that. It's brilliant, and I'm sure she loves the recognition, but also it's exactly as you say. Well, like some people love to have that kind of public one. Some people just like a nice little message and things on that, which you can never know until you start seeing how scared they look.
Exactly. Plus the fact that a lot of us, like the 3 of us in the call, because we talked about this one before we started recording, are suffering from the imposter syndrome. You're always thinking that, well, nobody anywhere cares about what I actually say, and if I go to somebody to say something, and that's something which we as a IT industry will need to start encouraging people, which is like, it's okay to say compliments. Compliments are good. Please keep on saying compliments. And
I
you
would
don't need
say
to
that is even more important in remote work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because again, because there is no other way to interact.
Exactly.
Like you cannot see somebody smile. You cannot have that pat on the back. The only thing we get is deliberate either email or reaction in Teams or a call. Right? That's the only 3 ways we can go about it. And sure, like if you can do that, your manager or your employer could send you flowers or a basket of fruit or whatever from the local farmer. There are gestures that can be done, but again, that also requires deliberate action.
Like the anonymous champagne bottle which I got last Christmas, which is like, okay,
but
there's
that's
no message.
Scary because it's anonymous, and you're like, for what? Why? Is it poison?
Exactly. That ended up being from my manager, but I had no idea. So,
That's very
okay.
There was no like card or a little invisible ink on it. CSI kind of style.
There's about 5 different people who could have got the benefits from that, and only one person had to send it. It was like, well, it's one of these people. I'll thank them anyway and see what happens. That's ideal.
Exactly.
I will thank the mysterious stranger, right, who sent me this bottle of stuff. Like, is it still unopened?
But coming back on the compliments and everything else, and in the case of Laura, I can guarantee that she was really kind of thankful for the feedback. But it's also cultural differences. I
absolutely
get noted that I'm not a typical Finn because I talk too much and I talk a lot. But I actually do that?
Who said
when
that?
we're in the public conference? Do I actually do that when we are actually outside of this bubble? Because at least for me, I'm a consultant. This is I'm an ex-consultant. This is an interesting, like a acting behavior. Acting behavior when you are in a role of doing things. I might feel a bit different when I'm actually in the conferences. Again, it's cultural differences, and that comes back on. Somebody's getting closer than 1 meter towards me because of the cultural differences. So.
Well, but that also means we deal with other people and they bring their whole self, right? And that also means personal preferences, whether you're introvert, extrovert, like all of that matters.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
So you two, obviously, you share through this podcast and a lot of the PnP stuff, and your personality comes through from that on there. And I know through Viva Engage, there's a stories and stories line. They're trying to encourage people to kind of have that quick video, put those out there, put more personality. I mean, would you encourage more people to, whether it's internally in an organization or to put more of themselves out there? And do you think it's more up to them? Because obviously you both do it.
So yes and no.
Yeah.
Yes and no.
Well,
right. So
so you're a consultant as well. Okay.
I wouldn't say it depends, right? Because like the hard part that I experience, and like I will use the analogy of MVP Summit, right? Like MVP Summit used to be in the past an in-person event where MVPs all over the world would fly in for a week to Redmond and basically to meet with their peers, it used to be in person, right?
Hopefully.
Anyways, right? And the trick there was it was so easy to see difference. Like for example, during the talks we would have with a product group where you would be in a room with 20 folks with whom or who because like you interact with these folks either on forums or calls. So you basically get in a room and you know who is who. And then transform that to the place where the room grows and there's few hundred folks and you don't know most of them. The room is too big and you will not share anything because the room got too big, right? And it feels awkward and there are people whom you don't know and it feels weird. And it's kind of the same thing in workplace.
Interesting.
If you share that, I used to work a lot in companies that were 20 odd folks. Basically, you knew everybody, you knew who is who. And it was so much easier, at least to me, to share anything in the open because I knew exactly who's going to look at it and who is who. At Microsoft, I've got 200K colleagues. I don't know majority of them. And you're like, do I really want to share this in the open? Who's gonna and it feels weird because the room is too big.
One dimension, obviously, in this discussion is also the role and then the almost like, well, I don't do stuff in analytic way because I'm more like, I try not to be in a role. I just want to be me, and I want to help everybody because that's just a natural thing for me to do. Now, but it really comes back on what are you trying to accomplish? Where does it actually make sense? I intentionally at some point started doing a lot of social media and promoting other people in social media and the awesomeness what people do in other community because it's a natural thing for me to do. Now, it's sure I will benefit out of it as well because I'm basically helping others to gain visibility, but it's encouraging people and also intentionally almost sharing some of the internal things, personal things like walking out in the park or the forest with the dogs every single day because that's and paddleboarding because that's part of me. Now it will most likely help then if we will meet somebody face to face. Somebody can come and say, hey, that paddleboarding video, that was really cool.
That's an interesting part. You share it in the open for everybody, but you don't share it internally. Why?
That's true. That's You're
not worried about sharing it with millions, but you're not sharing with the thousands internally.
That's actually a really interesting point as well, because if you do that in Twitter, it's more relaxed, it's more anonymous still, because it's just the name in a Twitter. If you do it in a workplace, then it actually has an impact on your day-to-day work. Now, to be fair, in my case, of course, the social media has an impact in my work because that's part of my work. Let's face it. But still, it's an interesting. Yeah, there's a difference. There's a clear difference.
And that's why I find it interesting, Waldek, when you say you're kind of happy to share with 20 people, because to me that was always, you can be wondering what so-and-so thought, and it may impact your relationship there. Whereas whether it's with a much larger organization, you're not going to know people, you can be more honest. And I spent many years in my career initially trying to be a corporate person and kind of be this, and it wasn't me. I struggled with it, and I kind of gave up and was like, yeah, you know what, I'm going to be myself, share that. If people don't like it, I'll find something else that fits that better. And it has helped me mentally far more to kind of be my honest self, to share that and let people.
That's called age and experience.
Within there. So. Yeah, yes. I have a lot less hair now, but you know, I feel a lot better from it. So.
But those are interesting dimensions, and again, we get if you think about the Viva Engage as an example, the Yammer and all of that, and people do write their profile messages in Viva Engage. Will that work if 180,000 employees will every day write their own things in Viva Engage? No. Will it work if you're a team lead where you explain what's actually happening, or you are a virtual team coach or something, you do something there and explain people who might be interested in your opinions? Yeah, absolutely. That's the whole idea. But it's interesting.
I'm just starting to do that within my team. And again, it comes to this hybrid one of I'm going to start recording videos, because you kind of forget that you don't always tell everyone everything. And maybe this comes back to the async comms. You have so many conversations. You don't always keep in track who you've told people, you know, what goes where. So just repeating some of that in a regular video and letting everyone watch that when they want to. Again, it's that async ability. Then you can kind of get feedback, and you've got comments, so you can allow people to engage with that as well. So and I'm not going to lie, I'm a Microsoft fanboy, so when Microsoft comes out with something, I try it. It doesn't always stick, doesn't always work, but I try and give it a go. So I think that's one of the things to put out there, is to put some of that personality and say, here's what's going on, here's some of the chats I've been having, just so you all know. Whether people do it or not, we'll find out in the next few months.
Which is precisely what Jeff Deeper does, for example, on a weekly basis. So he has a weekly 5-minute video. Sorry, Jeff, we know it's not a secret, so it's okay.
NDA. Well, it isn't anymore, but we only share it with friends.
That's a really good example of a really efficient 5 minutes. Today is Monday. Of course, that was released in Friday evening my time, because that's natural working time for Jeff, but it pops in the message feeds this morning for me when I start working, and then I'll listen that. I can easily put it in 1.2 speed just to listen to things, and that was interesting, let me go back and listen, what was that all about, and then I can start digging into other details if needed. But it's always 5 minutes. It's really interesting to hear what's actually happening in discussion points. So
And I think that's key. You don't want to sit in with a stand-up meeting and have your time taken up. But
yes,
when those short things are made available, then exactly as you say, you can choose what you dig into. And I hope, again, maybe Viva Engage, I'm probably putting too much into it, but hopefully that will start spearheading more async comms, at least, that go out rather than kind of having live event meetings. But
so I've been listening now when I'm working with the docs. I've been listening to Tony Fadell's book called Build. He's the guy who created Nest, the Nest thing, and then Google bought it, and he was working in Google and all of that. But it's a brilliant book related on the perception and also how people are taking granted of for example, perks, and then when you start adjusting something, they take it as a personal insult. That just reminded me, because there was a good example of that as just a form of cognitive value, that as in Google, they actually got free food, free drinks and snacks and all of that throughout the day, which they didn't get in Nest. So which from his perspective was like stupid, because that should not be the default case. And then when they changed the yogurt styles, which were available, somebody in the company meeting, where hundreds of thousands of people took the mic and basically said, I want to have that type of a yogurt. Why is it no longer available from the kitchen? So you're like,
well, taking things away from people is not, you like as with any perk, like any single thing you take hurts as twice or even more times as anything you give.
Plus the fact that was a synchronous company meeting where everybody is watching, and you're like,
doesn't
really?
matter. You were hurt. You felt hurt and attacked personally.
Exactly.
Your yogurt was no longer there.
Exactly. So, which is a good reminder, we are human beings.
Yeah. Drink your yogurt, kids.
Now, from a timing perspective, Kevin, we do apologize. I think we need to close up the interview. There would have been a lot of additional points. This was really cool.
The more the reason, we will get you back.
Exactly.
Sooner than in the next 4 years, we promise.
Absolutely have it, and we'd love to come back and talk more about Viva Explorers at some point as Viva lands, and as the APIs for Viva, if they ever appear, would love to come and talk about those at some point as well.
Viva Learning APIs are out partly, so
that is true. Yes.
But with Viva, they are individual modules, so they do have their own different timelines and all of that. So it's
on the next episode of PnP Weekly with Kevin, we will talk about.
Anyway, for the listeners and watching, see, I've been yelling too much. It was a way too good episode. La 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 la.
I'm not singing.
Yes. 10/10 would highly recommend.
But next we'll jump on the latest weekly articles. Thank you, Kevin, for joining us. It's a really good discussion. And I love the human side of the discussion, because IT is all about human interactions. It's just people-to-people business. So thank you for the great interview.
Thank you, Kevin.
No problem. And good luck for Ignite as well.
Thank you. Excellent. Thank you, Kevin, one more time for the interview. That was really, very cool. There would have been so many things to still talk about. So we got to the sweet spot of the how working has changed. Obviously, for me and Waldek both, the remote work is quite fundamental, because we've been working remotely for quite a few years. Waldek, how many years?
Yeah.
I need to think as well.
It's been 84 years. I don't know.
I think I'm at 8 years right now. So
7-ish, something around that. Basically, pandemic hit, and it was a Wednesday. Yeah,
well, true. Kind of a Wednesday. It changed a lot of the dynamics, of course, but it for you and me, it was something more natural. Now, it did change things to the positive as well, because again, it was more like, hey, now we start really focusing on making the remote work as a thing rather than being an exception. So, and the hybrid work nowadays is still a thing. Hopefully, luckily, we haven't completely fall back on everybody needs to be at the office, so which is good.
I am in the office.
I am in the office as well.
This is my office.
This is my office. That's actually really good. That could be a great social media campaign. This is my office. So
yeah. Royalties. Let me take the domain name already. Yeah.
Now, let's actually jump on the weekly articles. Just a reminder: #PnP Weekly on the Twitter. We'll find all of the cool things what you've written. We always go through the typical Microsoft blog sites, and then our platform community blog, and then the other articles which we can find related on Microsoft 365 all up. But we're super interested on what you actually write. So please share on your findings and your thought leadership. That's the right thing on what you've written down. Now, let's actually move on the news of today. You'll start.
Absolutely. So we've got here an article from Xin-Yi Lim, and the article is about how can you drive adoption of Viva, or how we drove adoption of Viva at Microsoft, right? So some of the things that we learned over the years as we've been adopting it, or years already. Yeah, it is 1+ years, right? So it counts already as years. It certainly feels like years, right? So there's a nice article capturing some of the things that we learned, along with a link to an article that builds upon it a little bit more. So if you are adopting Viva yourself, or you talk to customers who do, this might be an interesting article for you to read and to kind of give it a thought. What are the different things you need to take into account when trying to roll out Viva in your company?
Yep, absolutely. Then we had a new podcast from Inperson. So Inperson is a podcast hosted by Mark Cashman and Chris McNulty. And this time they talk about data centers and the think globally, act locally way of approaching this. So we are setting up data centers as a Microsoft now locally in quite a few countries, and the latest one being on Qatar. And then what does that mean? How does things work? What is in the planning of these kind of things, and what does the act locally actually means when you're setting up a data center? So really interesting discussion as well. Data centers are basically those cloud computers, because there's essentially still a computer running the things. It's not just.
You mean the one I have here? The one I have here? Yes. My
exactly.
Data center.
So it's just delegating to somebody else's computer. But a really cool discussion with Sean and John related on those things. Now, we also had an introduction to Microsoft Teams Appcamp. What is Appcamp?
So Appcamp is a on-demand workshop with videos, with really great content, all about helping you to understand the different steps you need to go through to bring your existing app to Microsoft Teams. And it's a really interesting thing, because oftentimes you have an app already. You have an app for work, or you are an ISV, you have an app, and you think like, if I were to expose that in Teams, do I need to rebuild from scratch or not? And the short answer is you don't need to. You can bring existing app to Teams. For the long answer and the existing step, or the steps that you actually need to go through, check out the Appcamp, because it will give you info about everything that's relevant in the steps related to, like, how do you bring the apps? How do you deal with auth? How do you go with exposing that app? What are the different things you can add to your app to make it more integrated more with Teams, right? So all the different things are exposed in the Appcamp, and the cool thing is you can watch it at your own pace. So either 0.8, you can rewind, fast forward, 1.5, that's all up to you. So you can watch it on your own terms and give it a try. And the most important part, we would love to hear from you how you like it, where we can improve, what's missing, what's cool. Tell us. We'd love to hear from you.
Yep. In social media, DM messages, all of that, always welcome, related on the feedback on all of the content what we have. We're everywhere. Now, we also released a public preview of SharePoint Framework 1.16 last week. And this is the first release of upcoming features. So starting from 2012, starting from 1.12 or 1.13, we started releasing public previews of the upcoming main release or main version. Whatever reason, SharePoint Framework is always about 1.16, 1.17, and so on. So it's not version 2, 3, 4, 5. It doesn't matter. It's a versioning.
It's a very important reason.
Fair point. It's always backward compatible and has been for all of the different releases, which is pretty cool. So already still today, version 1.0 SharePoint Framework solutions still work in the SharePoint Online, which is pretty mind-blowing actually when you think about it.
It is. It's pretty cool.
Anyway. 1.16 was announced as the first preview, and there's some new capabilities available in there. The two kind of most noticeable important ones is that we are updating our JavaScript framework for Teams directly to JavaScript framework v2. This will be actually done automatically, so you don't have to worry about anything. So if you are referencing to the Teams JavaScript SDK, you will start all of a sudden getting the V2 within your code. Now, as it's backward compatible, it should not. See, I'm saying should. It will not. Well, if you hit only public APIs, it will not have any impact on your application. If you've done something which is not recommended or not preferred, which is private APIs, then there might be an issue. So most likely you are not impacted on this.
What is the easiest way to check if your existing app that you might have built on 1.15, 1.14, 1.16, what is the easiest way to update your app to SharePoint Framework 1.16 preview?
Yes. So to be, and that's one thing.
Let's come back on that.
Absolutely. Now, and to benefit, and then the other big thing here is that we're adding this new capability for editing experience for the web parts, and that's mainly for SharePoint Online, which is around adding a option to add additional toolbar buttons, so you don't have to go to the property pane. You can modify settings directly in hovering on top of the web part, which is pretty cool as well. Now, good question from Waldek. How would I, if I want to have the benefits out of the latest toolchain, because runtime is always the latest. That's super cool to understand. But as I'm developing stuff, I want to have the advanced and of the latest development experience. How would I upgrade my solution? And answer is with CLI for Microsoft 365. It has a command for it, SPFX upgrade, which will basically give you the detailed steps on how do I upgrade from whatever version you are to the latest version of 1.16 being the preview version right now. So really, really cool stuff. And thank you for CLI for Microsoft 365 projects for all of the great work in there. Now, from Microsoft, we also had a update on the Microsoft Teams single sign-on on the functionality.
Yeah, so this is a really great article for, I would say, relevant to maybe not every enterprise, but typically in an enterprise where you have system with identity, and you want to be able to use that identity in your Teams app, right? So you want to be able to sign in with your SAP account or whatever account you have in your app. So how do you do that? How do you implement it? What are the different things you need to take into account? So this article takes you through the different things you need to take into account and what are the actual steps, right? So check it out. This is a really interesting article with a link to a sample code for this.
Really, really cool as well. Absolutely awesome stuff. Now, we also had from the Microsoft 365 blog, the main primary, there's so many blog posts locations nowadays. But from here, we're reminding people that we are retiring basic authentication in external Exchange Online. Between, I can say probably off record, why would we promote this in this location is that we probably are saying that there's too many people still using this. So, and this will be turned off in the October 1st, 2022. So this is a clear indication that everybody should be checking that please, whatever application you're using with Exchange Online, they are using the right authentication models. Why would that be important? Well, because basic authentication is not as secure as Azure AD-based authentication. With Azure AD, you are in a much, 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 much more secure environment. So we want our customers to use the right most secure security options. That's really
exactly.
Really
and maybe to add to what you said, I think that over time we mentioned this across all the different channels that we have, from LinkedIn to Twitter to different blogs. And I guess the reason is that we want to reach as broad audience as we can, from developers who need to adjust their code, to admins who need to manage that, to BDMs who need to plan this schedule included in planning and so forth and so on. So at the end of the day, we want to everybody to know that this change is coming, and it might affect you in some way. So you should at least be aware of it, so that then you can check. And maybe it's as simple as we're all good. But the most important part is that you know it's coming.
Yep, absolutely. Now, we also had some updates from the Power Platform side.
Exactly. So an article about how can you use actionable messages in Outlook with Power Automate. So in this one topic, we covered 3 keywords: Power Automate, Outlook, and actionable messages. And it's really interesting because the idea is like you might have known it from approvals, right? You get an approval or email in Outlook with an approval, and you can already action it. There's no need for you to click a link and go somewhere else. You can already act directly within the email. And that's the whole point. You can send actionable messages to Outlook so that you can act directly in Outlook, stay within the context of your work, not having to go to yet another place. You can do exactly all of the work that you need directly from where you are. And this article gives you an example how you can do that.
Yep, really, really cool stuff as well. Absolutely. Now, I have to say that bit of a bummer. It does not have an example message actually shown in here, but it will actually render the actionable message directly in the email.
That's exactly why you need to go through the steps to see the message. If you want to see it, it's like, haha, you want to see it? You got to go through the steps.
Of course, absolutely. Go through the steps, you'll see what it actually means. Now, on the Power App side, there was an interesting announcement: extend modern commands with custom pages and geospatial mapping. So basically, have more detailed location details for your applications. So for example, mapping between the locations or specific locations in the map, and how do you adjust them, how do you set them on, how do you use them in your Canvas application. So really, really cool stuff on the different options. And I think the mapping, those are so powerful capabilities to actually get it in the custom Power Apps as well. Really, really cool stuff.
Yeah.
Now, there was a new blog post also from Louisa Fries in the Platform Community blog.
Yeah, so she goes on with her series about how can you build Power Apps that don't look like Power Apps. So imagine that your company has specific design language that you would like to apply in your Power Apps. How would you go about it? What are the different things you have to take into account? Going as far as building, your custom experiences, animations, buttons, and so forth and so on, just to ensure that your apps, Power Apps, look the way you want them to look and not the way they look like by default. Really interesting stuff.
Yeah, and one of the points here is that she's using the material design, which is then making your Power App look like a standard Google Android look and feel, because if you're targeting the Android audience, again, depending on what kind of audience you are targeting on. Yep. Now, the second new blog in the Platform Community blog was from Duval Beena, deploy static websites with Power Platform. That's really cool as well. So you can basically tap in your Power Platform to the Azure operations and then do automation behind the scenes. And that's pretty interesting looking chart on the processes, what's actually happening, and from an automation perspective. So really impressive. But that's the beauty of Power Automate. You can do together, even with the Azure DevOps, you can automate deployments and testing and all of that stuff based on whatever is triggering that automation behavior. Yeah, really, really cool stuff. Thank you, Duval, on that one. Then we had a blog post from Marcus Miller.
Yeah, yet another one about SSO and how to do it the right way, which indicates there are multiple ways to do it. Some are more right than others, like animals on a farm. So Marcus goes through the different steps. What he recommends is the right way to go about implementing SSO in Teams apps. Really interesting stuff.
Thank you, Marcus, on that one. We also had an article from AC, Andrew Connell from Void Thanos on unboxing the SharePoint Framework 1.15.2 release, which is the latest GA production-ready release on the SharePoint Framework, with the video and explaining what are the changes, what has happened, what does it actually mean for developers. So he's really doing a good job on explaining all of the different differences and options. So what's actually happening behind the scenes. We also had an article in the Recording 365 from Daniel and Daryl.
About the adoption score. And I think we talked about it during the last episode, right? That at Microsoft, we introduced the adoption score, basically a way for you as a company that works on Microsoft 365 to better understand how different parts of Microsoft 365 that you rolled out to your employees are adopted. Are they being used? How are they being used? And it's not about being able to follow what specific person does, as opposed to it's about how services for which you pay Microsoft are being used within your company, and if there is anything that you need to do to increase the usage and to make it more effective. And in this episode, they talk about this new feature, what it entails, and so forth and so on. So if you're interested in their opinion, tune in.
Check it out. Now on Waldek's blog post, you want to probably talk about this one. This is all you.
You can talk about it too, because you were there at the last community call, the Microsoft 365 community call. I had the opportunity to talk about one of the recent additions to SharePoint Framework, being the ability to customize list forms. And in this post, I summarized all the different things we talked about, demos that I showed, basically the basics, what are the different things that are included, what are the things you can build, what are the things you need to take into account. So this is a great summary. At the end, there's also the recording. If you're interested in that, if you build on SPFX, if you want to use the list experience to build apps, this is a really interesting topic for you to learn about.
Yep, really, really cool stuff. Absolutely. Now, Paolo also had a updated weekly video on his Great BSS Tech Bytes, episode 220, on using the search verticals web parts in PnP Modern Search. PnP Modern Search is a one SPFX web part open source solution, which can be used to create enterprise experiences. And then the search verticals is one of those web parts, part of that larger package. So thank you, Paolo, on that great video. Shane Young had an interesting video, especially if you have a look on his hands behind the scenes. Okay, there we go.
He's video bombed by somebody.
Yes.
And it's about Power Apps import Excel to SharePoint list or any data source with Power Automate. So it's about a Power App that imports Excel to a list. Okay, so you have an Excel sheet, you want to have it imported to a list or any data source using Power Automate Flow. I'm trying to wrap my head around, hold on, you're doing what with what? So you have an Excel sheet you uploaded to a list using a Power Automate Flow from a Power App. Is that the case?
No, I think it's actually you're pointing to an Excel file. Creating Excel file, get the tables, read the tables, push the items in a table to a SharePoint list. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess that's what you were exactly saying.
And you're doing
Power
that
Automate.
with Power Automate Flow from a Power App.
Yes. Initiate. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yeah, the title, all good, Shane, and all good, Waldek. The title is complex. There's a lot of buzzwords on that one, but that's precisely what it actually says.
Yeah, so you have a Power App. In the Power App, you can probably pick an Excel sheet, and you will get that Excel sheet. You would send it over to a Power Automate Flow, and that will then read the Excel sheet and get the data to a SharePoint list.
Absolutely.
We
got it.
Demystified it.
And then Laura Rogers had a Power Hour recording on the Power Apps Creator Kit. So the Creator Kit is something what Microsoft is actually providing to improve your productivity and when you're creating Power Apps in the Power Platform. And she's talking about how to get it installed and how to start using that within the Power App, what you're building. But that's it for this time on the weekly PnP Weekly.
Well, that would be an interesting thing if PnP Weekly wasn't weekly. Why?
That is actually true. That's true. Now, I guess we are a bit over time again. Surprise. But I guess that's all good for this time. Any last words from your side, Waldek?
So long and thanks for all the fish.
Great book, by the way. Douglas Adams. And
yes, Hitchhiker's Guide
to Your New Galaxy.
The Galaxy, yeah.
Anyway, thanks everybody for watching. Remember hashtag PnP Weekly on the Twitter, so we know all of the good stuff and awesome stuff what the community is building. And we'll be back with the PnP Weekly in a week. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.